Disco Waltz by Gunter. Clock in. Another day, another rock. This one was probably from the far side of Mars. Disco stone drones guided in the new rock that began to block out the sun. The shadow made him forget the dream he had about glasses. A little curl grinned across his face as he sat in the black. Floating in his rectangular Disco life workstation, he tried not to look down, or up for that matter. It had no floor or ceiling and jutted out over the drop-off of Disco Space Station 221834756. If this giant rock was a speck in all this blackness, what was he? He didn't like to think that, so he didn't look, and it was easy to avoid because the rock was so big. Even the stars began to hide behind it as it got closer. Only the rotating amber warning lights on the drones illuminated the dark side in sweeping flashes. Maybe this rock would be a 2-year, a 5-year, maybe even a 10-year. His messmate, Teeth, got her tenure a year ago and couldn't be happier. She said it was a planet killer, one of the ones you can make tunnels in and mine around inside. She said they found it when they KO'd a hauler passing through an asteroid belt 'cause the captain thought he was bigger than he was. She'd get a whole 1,000th of the profit of that beast. His was nothing that big, so he swept that hope away quick. Still, it looked substantial, a year at least. Maybe he could afford a half-day off with it, or some full portions, and hot. The next warm glow to grace his grin was the molten rock rippling where his Disco hyperpick contacted the stone. The jackhammering impacts rumbled up his arm and stressed where it met his shoulder socket. It was a familiar and oddly comforting stress, even if it would hurt later. He could hear the sound the pick made on the stone. It would deafen him. Good thing there's no sound out in the wild black yonder. Some of them gave names to their tools and put stickers on them, but he hadn't. By the time he learned people do that, his pick had wronged him too many times to make it cute. The Disco ads said it had 600,000 RPM. Sure, if it wasn't hitting anything. He tried to attach his Disco mag piton to the rock, but it didn't take. There wasn't even enough iron in this one. He'd have to check the content later to see what he was getting. They gotta let the bots stop picking these rocks, or at least spend more than a dime on their sensors. Whatever. He liked being untethered, and he liked mining the stone away when there wasn't something valuable to worry about breaking. The numbing rumble of his pick and the warmth of the resulting lava penetrating the Disco heat-away visor in his Disco mine helm let him forget. He tried to remember something he was thinking about. Something green. Oh, it's gone. Mess time. "Lefty," Teeth said in the same excited way she did every day. "Wonder what we get today." Each time she said "Lefty," a shudder went through him, reminding him of that time the rock broke wrong and his bones broke worse. But she was so happy it made it all okay. They both inserted their Disco punch cards into the dirty console on the wall, paying for the portion they earned. For Teeth, it was always a race that Lefty happily lost. They played their little games to keep things upbeat. You only get assigned one messmate, so you gotta make friends. "Come on, you're not even trying anymore," she said through her gaps. "If you beat me next time, I'll finally tell you how I got this award-winning smile." She peeled back her lips and chomped a few times. The contract forbade them from disclosing their names to one another. She wasn't going to call him DCE 846-75432, and no way in hell he was calling her DCE 838398786. They named each other after what they were missing. As his tray shot out from the wall, there was still a dried piece of mashed potato glued to it from a week ago. He knew it had been a week because it was Tater's Day, as Teeth was sure to remind him. She got a full portion, and he got half, and cold. As they slopped, they spoke about their current rocks, the good old ones and the ones ahead. Teeth chattered about her tenure and that she just knows there'll be a gem in somewhere. "She's a big, beautiful rock. Really, Lefty, wishing you could see her. Think I'm gonna marry this and just gotta find the gem for the ring." They laugh. He told her not to think like that. There were plenty of rocks in the sky. Back to the black. He finished breaking off the first shelf of material off the rock and loaded it into Disco kinetically actuated resource transport. He used his thrusters to float the full cart over to the scanning bay and shoved it under the grid. 0.03 iron content, 0.001% nickel content, 14.687% carbon content, 85.313% silicate content. Profit share projection 0.00000038%. He stared right through the pale blue glow of the readout, and his grin curled away. He unloaded the cart into the containment chute next to the scanning bay and went back to his rumbling. Clock out. He returned to his box, drifting in through the airlock and clunking down. Waiting for pressurization, he envisioned the profits detracting from his account for the oxygen filling his Disco sleep station. They didn't even give him the fresh stuff either. The plastic air filled his nostrils as he did his best to sleep. Through the staleness of the air, he took deep breaths until the wind flowed through his hair in rushes, tumbling through grass blades obeyed by no concept of prophecy or challenge of the divine, in shining green rolling over hills of land, bowed by the very nature of what willed them to be, filled with the roots of every strand winding into enmeshed threshes of messages, electric connected in synapse, firing, rivaling the sun, soaring through snores, beaming and warming the whole creation, swirling in a dewdrop hung on one stalk of crystal grain reaped by the sound of his Disco alarm clock. Clock in. He sleepily blinked at the blue blinking lights of his Disco mine helm turning on, and anything green was gone. He felt the 600,000 RPM of the pick reverberating through his shoulder and into his jaw. He kept hoping for a vein he knew wouldn't be there. Didn't keep him from squinting at every spot on the rock that the light hit funny, though. No glints, just dull shine. He kept his passes through the stone long and clean, taking some pleasure in how cuboidal he could make his chunks. His grin flickered when he got one that looked so unlike a piece of rock that it was hard to understand where it came from. He let it hang there for a moment, admiring the clean edges and flat sides, before it floated a little too high, and he began to see the blackness beyond. He put it in the cart with every other chunk. He went back to work. Mess time. "Lefty," she said, beating him to the console again. He actually tried that time. "Ha! No tooth tales for you today. Did you hear about the plant we're getting?" She was beaming. "What, hydro? Refinery?" "No, idiot, the plant. The message from Disco. Pull it up." He unhooked his Disco data tab off his hip and pulled up his messages. One came in while he was asleep. Employee Appreciation Day. Dear cherished Disco Administrative Official / Employee / Laborer. November 4th is Employee Appreciation Day, and Disco is honoring you. A Disco houseplant will be delivered to you on that day to liven up your Disco sleep station. Enjoy that sweet green scent and keep on working hard. We appreciate you. Congratulations, Disco Management. Disco trademark is not responsible for any delays or failure in delivery of any Disco administrative official / employee / laborer employment awards that are not directly included in the Disco Shared Profits Contract Stipulation Section 1.A. A real plant! Crazy, right? I'd rather get a sick day once in a generation, but a plant's pretty snazzy. Her typical enthusiasm was perforated with rare resentment, but only for a moment. He could see all three of her gaps, and he shook his head, returning her smile with his grin while he poked at his 1/3 portion of cold mashed carrots. Back in the black. The thought of something green in his box kept him moving the rest of the day. It almost made him forget the pain in his left shoulder he'd get at the end of each shift. What kind of plant would it be? He didn't know what kinds of plants there were, just that there were different kinds. Teeth says she heard their food comes from plants, but he was never sure about that. Would he be able to eat this one? Probably not. Clock out. The hiss of pressurization was particularly irritating today, like someone obnoxiously shushing him. The electricity of that irritation followed him to bed and zapped him in the ribs as he tried to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he would hear that hiss and see the pale blue glow of profit share projection 0.000038%. Eventually his breathing slowed, and his eyelashes drooped in the fields of evening sunset, heavy and tired, and easing to the late summer wind, bringing memories yet to be bedded in meadows rose, sloes autumn interpose, amber in the canopy of vermilion shimmers under branches, tossing, turning over a new leaf to find pine cone rolling up her sleeves, ventures into worm, writhing, churning soil, shivering blackness where life sleeps peacefully, piecing apart synaptic parts, winding into tendrils, tangled patiently, whispers into wood struck by the axe of his disco alarm clock. Clock in. The first part of the day really blew by. Something about how he slept just made his eyes glaze over, and he sank into the stone. Cutting, collecting, containing, cutting, collecting, containing. Before long he was 20 minutes late to mess time. When he got there, Teeth wasn't. She must have finished eating already. He got a cold quarter portion of mashed beets for being late. Back in the black. Cutting, collecting, containing, cutting, collecting, containing, cutting, collecting, containing. Clock out. A week after Employee Appreciation Day, there was still no plant and still no teeth. Lefty's eyes snapped open before he could dream. His console receiving a message didn't typically wake him, but tonight it pierced his ears. The pale blue display lit up the harsh corners of his microscopic room, which suddenly felt smaller in the darkness. He slumped out of bed and squinted at the blinding blue, barely keeping his balance. He pushed the button he has to push extra hard, because it barely works. Messmate. Dear cherished Disco Administrative Official / Employee / Laborer, we regret to inform you that we have lost contact with DCE 838-39786 during their assigned work. Until further notice, there is no replacement messmate for your mess unit. As a show of our condolences, we have put your Employee Appreciation Day Disco houseplant on priority order. It should be delivered by the end of your shift to liven up your disco sleep station. Enjoy that sweet green scent and keep on working hard. We appreciate you. Our deepest sympathies, Disco Management. Disco trademark is not responsible for any workplace accident of any administrative official / employee / laborer that occurs during Disco assigned labor and during Disco work hours, as per the Shared Profits Contract Stipulation Section 6.c. The administrative official / employee / laborer is held responsible for any and all workplace accidents, as per Shared Profits Contract Stipulation Section 6.d. Silence. Silence except for the buzzing of the screen that stared right through him. Guess he was never going to learn how she lost her teeth. Clock in. Mess time. Back in the black. Clock out. After pressurization, he dragged his feet into his box. His console blipped with a new message. He pushed hard and didn't even feel the button biting back into his finger. Employee Appreciation Day. Delivery complete. Dear cherished Disco Administrative Official / Employee / Laborer, enjoy your Disco houseplant. It will liven up your Disco sleep station. Enjoy that sweet green scent and keep on working hard. We appreciate you. Congratulations, Disco Management. Disco trademark is not responsible for any delays or failure in delivery of any Disco Administrative Official / Employee / Laborer employment awards that are not directly included in the Disco Shared Profits Contract Stipulation Section 1.a. There was nothing in his Disco vacuum mail tube, and no package left behind by a bot. His finger began to tack on the keyboard, wondering where his priority order was, but then he remembered the fine print. Huffing, he stared through the pale blue display, and his brain blurred the words until all he could see was profit share projection 0.000038%. Calluses rubbed crust from his eyelids when he was startled by his printer starting up. It shunted, grindingly, back and forth, coughing up something green. He plucked it from the printer's mouth with his Disco relim, and the servos whined. It was a branded sticker in the vague shape of a potted plant. In the middle it said, "Scratch me." The servos whined again, anticipating from his brain waves that he was going to crush the thing, but he stopped when he remembered those gaps smiling at him. He trudged over to the airlock, peeled the sticker and slapped it next to the door. Staring through it for a moment, he was reawakened by the text, "Scratch me." He raised the disco hyperpick that was permanently integrated into his disco relimb and prodded the sticker with the business end. The sickly sweet smell hooked into his nostrils, immediately recoiling face, slaking temples over cranial carnal crashes, rolling over belly up in pools, placid, vapid, aimless sloshing this way and that, numbly finding resolve, fleeting recollection, painful cleansed stainless machinations, riveted red-hot piercing synaptic transmission, injecting chemical castration, clashing agents spreading subsection screws into skull. He forgot about teeth. He forgot about the crushing death of his arm. He was pleased with his disco houseplant. He was pleased with his profit share projection, 0.0000038%. He went to bed. He dreamt about work.